All right. Short reviews for July 19th. We're getting to these a little bit late because I have been busy and not able to record. And yeah, we're going to stick with just 6 items every week for the rest of the year. I think that is a lot easier for me to manage, and it just allows me to get to the better things and hook in a few things that I'd like to cover. And we start right away with Flesh Vessels Yearning the Promethean Fates Sealed, which is a Chicago, Illinois based quartet who I guess we'd call them a progressive rock slash death metal or a progressive metal band in general, where this um, we'd gotten a single song EP from this band a little while ago, and it was impressive for its aggressive style, but it didn't quite seat death metal into its sound in a sensical way. It felt forced, I guess is the way to put it. And in this sense, they've added death metal to their repertoire, but it isn't just pure death metal or black death metal album. It's sort of an esoteric blackened death metal record that uh, mostly focuses on its progressive rock influences. And I don't mean that it's necessarily corny, but it is prone to rant and move in ways that are just not expected. And I think this is a little bit of a sleeper record in the terms of it snuck up on me a little bit. It's very much built from vignettes and these scenarios where they're creating a little bit of an escapist path in every direction on each song, but they ground those moments in heavier death metal sections. And often these songs are about 10 minutes each on average, with a little bit of an interlude between each one to sort of give a little bit of space. And I thought it was a great record. I think it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit out there in the best kind of way. And I just didn't have a full review's worth of gas in terms of talking about it, so still very much worthy of picking up, and probably I'll include it on one of the best records of the month. Echoes of Journeys Past is the most recent full length from Flight. This is a Norwegian heavy rock band, and one that has elements of 70s heavy metal and progressive rock. I would say early 70s progressive rock and mid 70s hard rock. They stop short of cheesy AOR yacht rock, but they certainly cover the more ex progressive rock style of heavy music. And it is all very much a throwback, and it's a very genuine feeling throwback this time around. I think they sort of fumbled with their second record. It was a little bit gummy in its guitar tone. It was a little bit out there. A lot of people love that record, but I felt like it didn't really hit upon the retro sound they wanted it to. And this one does quite a bit better. It's a little bit more simple in its approach, and it's a little bit more detailed in its songcraft. It's very classic songwriting, and it has sort of an analog feel to it. It's a little bit warmer. It's kind of a good vibes record. Like, I hate to say that, but it's um pretty interesting. It's not as dark as I had expected. So I enjoyed listening to it, but I didn't see what all the fuss was about. Even though it's this is a better record than their last, so I'm sort of getting there with this record, but I think it needs more time, even beyond what I've given it. So check it out. It's definitely worth sinking into. It's definitely memorable. So see what you think. Order is the latest full length from British and United States-based industrial experimental black metal band Decoherence, and I've covered this band in the past. I don't have a lot new to say about it. They didn't quite take the full dip back into industrial metal influence as I thought they would. This is still very much an atmospheric black metal trip. It is very much an extension of what they were doing on their last full length, and they kind of start to get there through towards the end of the album in terms of incorporating more of the expected industrial and post-industrial influences. But maybe that's me just wanting them to go there, because they seem pretty content on this very distant feeling atmospheric black metal sound, and it's nuance. I think nuance is really where they want you to focus in terms of the mix and where they've set all these instruments. You sort of want to keep turning the volume up and listening a little bit closer, because they bury so much of it in the center of the mix that I found myself cranking this up louder than I intended to try to get the nuance out of it. And it made for an interesting listen. I don't know that it sort of jumped at me enough to really stick in mind. So Commodus is a pretty interesting band. I think this is one of those groups that sort of became sort of part of the raw black metal zeitgeist of limited demo-only recordings, and I would say their early work was pretty average. I mean, they kind of got up to a professional standard on their first full length. It was a little bit hard to find, but it was a great record, and it was way more accessible and better recorded, and like I think it kind of shocked people that it was so well recorded and just kind of a little bit more accessible in general. Similar to what has happened with other raw black metal bands in the more recent past, is they get to this more professional level. They've obviously made a little bit more money, and I feel like this record, Wreath of Bleeding Snowfall, is a step back. It's a step back into the rawness that people want. It does feel like it's pleasing that level of fandom, while basically just following that similar path in terms of raw black metal interest and creating a different feeling. This is definitely a different feeling on the record. It's much more intended to be maybe more distant, soaked in more of a less of a heroic stance and more of just like a bleak winterscape as depicted. And I think that the narrative really comes across in a lot of interesting ways, while also touching upon, I don't know, hardcore influences and grooves and things like that that are just a little bit unexpected from this sort of deep underground type band. So worth checking out if you have any, if you invested in their past releases. I think this is a band kind of worth following. Infinite Psychic Depths is the second full-length album from Outer Heaven, and yeah, this band, it's death metal salad is the way I'd put it. It's like a mix of a bunch of different influences that are mostly United States death metal in nature, and they just kind of go for it and see what happens. And a lot of the time, it just means for great riffs. And that's the one thing to say about this band, is they always have riffs. They've always got tons of real death metal influence piling onto this thing, and as much as they are sold as sort of one of the death metal hardcore type bands, you don't really feel that on this record. You don't feel like this is just like one of those chunky, boring, slow records that everyone's kind of like sleeping through. This is an actual death metal album with great drumming and tons of dual rhythm guitar attack throughout. It's a very brutal album, and compared to the last even, but my only complaint is they've kind of followed the template of the last record, and they've not really made a name for themselves outside of that pure death metal feeling. I think they're one of the bands that do it right, but that they don't really have a direction. They don't create that tunnel vision with their work, and in that sense, they don't really have a strong singular personality. They just kind of go at it wherever they feel like, and it's cool. Like, it feels like not so much like a hobby project, but it feels like the way that a lot of bands exist in the underground, and it's cool to see them getting a lot of attention even when they're doing something like that. Same thing I would say for Blood Incantation, just for reference. I think that you can tell they love death metal, and they're pulling from great influences, but they're not exactly their own sound in full yet. So they'll get there, I'm sure. I mean, they're obviously moving towards that here, but I don't know where they're going to take it to where it's their own, other than the audio-visual aspect of it, which is pretty strong too. So anyway, if you like death metal, you probably enjoyed this record, and I thought I'd mention it because I enjoyed it. Streams of Rot is the debut full length from Formless Odon, and this is a Lovecraft influenced death metal band from the folks who are in. They also make up Desolator and Nullification. These are Philippines based artists, and this is their side project that sounds. Maybe leaning a little bit more towards the immolation-esque side, the incantation-esque side of death metal, which has very modest production values and a pretty interesting sound. They don't necessarily step into death doom metal here. They just focus on very simple riffing and a straight old school death metal sound, which we have to be a little bit forgiving for some of the guitar work and the tones here because they're just not necessarily ultra pro level anything. This is just underground death metal in truth, and I appreciate that. Now, I hate to change the conversation away from the music, but this is kind of, it bothers me quite a bit when I want to cover an album, but I don't want to support artificial intelligence created art. For me, it's sort of like selling fractals that a computer made to someone. You know, it's just, for me, not in what I want to see. I want to see handcrafted art in death metal. That is a big proponent of what death metal is, and using AI prompts to create death metal is not something that I'll ever want to be associated with. So, not a big deal, really, because the album art is fine. It's just that I really feel like anyone, even a member of the band, could have sat down with a brush and painted out something just as good with a couple of tries. So, minor note, but I don't like AI, so that's all. Yeah, otherwise a good album. It's a solid album worth picking up, and I think they of the three bands, I think I like Nullification most from what they do, but this is a good addition to their oeuvre, and I like where they're going with this. I'd like to see what they do on future records. Cause of the morning, feel the force of the